Every generation has its favorite complaint about children. Kids today are spoiled. Parents don't know how to discipline anymore. Or my personal favorite, back in my day, we didn't have all these fancy diagnoses. Children just behaved. But here's the question I want us to wrestle with today. Are we really handing out diagnoses like candy? Creating labels for every small behavior? Or are we finally learning to understand kids in ways we have been missing for generations? When I first stepped into this world as both a parent and a professional, I was pulled into the middle of this debate. On one side, people would say to me, don't let them stick a label on your child. Once they do, you'll never shake it off. On the other side, I meet parents who are desperately fighting for a diagnosis because without that, doors to support stayed tightly shut. I lived both of these realities. I see the fear that comes when you suspect something is different about your child, but you are terrified of what a diagnosis might mean for their future. And I've also seen the relief in a parent's eyes when someone finally names what's going on, and suddenly they are not battling alone anymore. That's the tension we're talking about today. Let's be fair. The people who say we are overdiagnosing kids aren't pulling that idea out of thin air. Think about it. How often do you hear phrases like, every kid is hyper these days? Do they all really need ADHD medication? Why does every meltdown suddenly mean autism? Back in my day, we just called that bad behavior. Behind these comments is usually one of two fears. Fear one, loss of discipline. That somehow we have become so soft as parents and teachers that we are letting kids off the hook by blaming everything on a diagnosis. Fear two, medicalization of normal childhood. That ordinary behaviors like being energetic, shy, or sensitive are being turned into conditions that need doctors and labels. And honestly, I understand the concern. Childhood is naturally messy. Not every tantrum is a meltdown. Not every daydreamer has ADHD. And not every shy child is autistic. But here's the catch. Stopping the conversation at we are overdiagnosing often silences the families who are actually fighting for help. Now let's flip it, because there's another side. For decades, children who have genuine struggles were dismissed. The naughty child who was actually overwhelmed. The lazy student who had undiagnosed ADHD. The badly parenting child who was actually autistic and drowning in sensory overload. I think of the countless families who tell me, I knew something was different, but no one listened. Teachers told me to just be stricter. Relatives told me I was making excuses. And then, when we finally got a diagnosis, it was like the whole world caught up to what I've been shouting for years. Diagnosis in those cases is not a weakness. It's a key that opens doors to supports, therapies, accommodations, and most importantly, understanding. And yes, it comes with risk. But the truth is, for many families, without that piece of paper, you don't get access to the resources you need. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine two children, both struggling in school. One has a diagnosis and one doesn't. The child with a diagnosis gets an SNA in the classroom, targeted learning plans, access to speech and language therapy, and maybe even respite support. The child without a diagnosis gets labeled as difficult, maybe suspended, maybe falling further and further behind because nobody recognizes what's happening. Same struggles, two totally different outcomes. And the only difference? A diagnosis. That's why this debate can't be reduced to too many diagnoses. For the child and the family living in the middle of it, that label could be the difference between growing and finally getting a lifeline. So where does that leave us? Are we overdiagnosing kids or finally understanding them? Maybe the answer is both. Yes, there's a risk of rushing into labels. We need to stay careful, thoughtful, and aware that children grow, develop, and change. Not every quirk or behavior needs a condition. But we also need to admit the truth. In the past, too many children were overlooked, dismissed, or punished for struggles that were real. And now that we are starting to understand brains and behaviors differently, the pendulum is swinging to the other side. The key is balance. Diagnosis should never be a life sentence. It's a tool that guides parents, teachers, and professionals to respond with empathy and strategy instead of shame and blame. So the next time someone says to you, "We're just giving out diagnoses like candy," pause and ask, is that really what's happening? Or are we finally putting names to challenges that were always there, but hidden in plain sight? Because at the end of the day, it's not about candy or labels or ticking boxes. It's about children, real families, real struggles, and the chance to understand them better. And this is just the first debate in our series, the parenting battle that won't die. In the next episode, we're diving into the age-old accusation. Is it bad parenting or something more? Trust me, you don't want to miss that one.